Hello folks, this is Aidan, Jonah, Editor-in-Chief of the Camp Files here. I'm here covering Toronto Coalition Against NATO's rally against the NATO proxy war in Ukraine. We're going to be here providing live coverage of the speeches, of the events. We're going to talk to organizers, and we're going to see what happens throughout this event. Look forward to some great coverage. Hello folks, and now Camp Files coverage. We're here speaking with Tynan Liebert, who's part of the organizing team with TCAN and is a member of the Communist Worker Circle. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Hey, it's great to be here, Aidan. Thanks for being out here and doing your part to get the truth out to the masses.
No worries at all. So let's talk about this organizing process. How has it been so far?
Oh, well, one of the things is that with NATO losing the war, the mainstream media and the ruling class, our ruling class that it serves, is less and less able to control the narrative. The lies that they've been feeding the working class and the rest of the public for the past year and a half aren't sticking. They're losing control of the narrative, and that's meant that people who have known from the beginning that NATO's proxy war in Ukraine and Western Russia is unjust, but were maybe a little concerned about speaking out because of the incredible backlash that critics of imperialism have faced, now have the confidence not only to come out to a rally like this, but also, to get in there and do some of the organizing work to make it all possible. So, I'd say it's been edifying being involved in this committee. You have a lot of people, a lot of goodwill. They know history is on their side, and they're doing what's necessary to make this whole rally here a success.
Speaking with Julius Arscott. Julius, can you tell us what organization you're with?
Well, I'm with Socialist Action, League for Socialist Action, and we're here today to protest the war, and we want the war to end. We want negotiations for peace. That needs to be the priority.
Front is based on three slogans: end NATO's proxy war in Ukraine, disband NATO, and Canada out of NATO. While all the organizers of today's event oppose NATO's role in Ukraine, there are some very important differences between us. The Bolshevik tendency right from February 2022 has argued that the international working class has an interest in a Russian military victory in this conflict.
Victory to Russia!
In our initial statement, we observed that Russia's special military operation is a tactically aggressive but strategically defensive venture. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO, close to his borders. That's the head of NATO, and that was a true statement. Russia has good reason to be concerned about NATO close to its borders, because for 3 decades, American strategists have been openly mooting plans to solve the Russian problem by chopping Russia up into 3 or more small statelets. These statelets will be easy to control politically, militarily, and of course it'll be easy for U.S. corporations to move into the loop. This is an aggressive imperialist alliance led by the U.S. with major Canadian involvement.
Yeah.
NATO destroyed Libya and Iraq and is doing the same to Ukraine.
Yeah.
NATO is destroying Ukraine by using it as a proxy against Russia.
Canada out of NATO now! Canada out of NATO now! Canada out of NATO now! Canada out of NATO now!
Thank you. Canada out of NATO, negotiate, don't escalate. The war in Ukraine poses a grave danger to humanity. The conflict will end by negotiation, or it will end in nuclear destruction of the world. Socialist Action is opposed to all wars except the class war. We oppose a NATO victory. We oppose a Kremlin victory. Socialist Action seeks the defeat of all the capitalist powers, starting with NATO and the Canadian state. NATO provoked conflict in Russia. NATO's expansion to Russia's borders, its violation of the Minsk treaties, its training and arming of the Ukraine's military, and support for Ukraine against its eastern Donbass region. These have been the principal causes behind the current conflict.
Speaking on behalf of the Communist Workers Circle, Jack Dempster.
The NATO imperialists and their puppet state in Kyiv must lose their war against the Donbass and Russia. Class-conscious workers must defend the national rights of the peoples of the Donbass against Kyiv and its fascist battalions, must support a Russian military victory in this war while giving no political support to Vladimir Putin's Bonapartist government. The capitalist Russian state, resting like Ukraine's on the ruins of a worker state, deserves to be overthrown through working class revolution. But it is easy to call it in the abstract a revolution, and much more difficult to fight towards it concretely. A decisive victory of labor over capital can only be realized by an unyielding dedication to the rights of oppressed nations and peoples. The presence of the Russian army was justified in Syria, and it is justified today in those parts of Ukraine which have voted to join Russia.
That's right.
The Ukrainian working class has been sent to die en masse in a war spearheaded by Nazis such as Azov.
Shame.
The capitalist media has whitewashed these fascists as freedom fighters, just as they labeled hardcore jihadists in Syria as moderate rebels. In the West, every yuppie professor and bourgeois politician is in a war frenzy, screaming for the blood of Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, ignorantly parroting the most depraved war propaganda. Billions of dollars worth of weapons have been sent to Ukraine. Rockets, cluster bombs, Leopard tanks. Meanwhile, workers here in the West continue to suffer from skyrocketing inflation and the scourges of homelessness and hunger.
The main enemy is not in Moscow. The main enemy is in Ottawa. In imperialist countries like Canada, anti-imperialist militants will want to see the defeat of Nato and Canada and the Canadian ruling class in this war. As the great German revolutionary Karl Liebknecht said during World War I, the main enemy is at home. Some of us, no doubt, will think that peace negotiations are the way forward. But NATO and its Kiev client are not interested in peace. They're interested in war. And as Marxists, we understand that a lasting and a just peace is impossible under global capitalism and the imperialist world order upon which it rests.
Down with imperialism! No arms to Ukraine! And no more sanctions!
There are many reasons to oppose NATO's proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, which have been ably outlined by the previous speakers. I would like to focus on two more, and they are the supply by NATO of cluster bombs and depleted uranium weapons to Ukraine. Cluster bombs are a prohibited weapon according to a convention signed by Canada and most countries of the world. When Biden announced 2 months ago he was supplying them to Ukraine, Trudeau issued a perfunctory statement of condemnation of these weapons, but kept on sending more in arms and funding to the Zelensky government, some of which arms can be used to fire cluster bombs. According to prominent Canadian lawyer Dimitri Lascaris, Canada's actions violate Article 1C of the Convention, which states that state parties must not encourage anyone to use these weapons. Using cluster bombs is a war crime. Supplying cluster bombs to Ukraine makes NATO's war in Ukraine an illegal war. Ukraine and Canada, as you can see, have a Nazi problem. The Hunka affair was not an accident, something that can be atoned for by the resignation of the House Speaker. Hunka was a culmination of a pro-Nazi policy on the part of the Canadian government for the past 70 years. Canada admitted Hunka and 2,000 other Waffen-SS war criminals following World War II and granted them legal immunity. Shame indeed. The Canadian government also admitted thousands more Nazi collaborators from Eastern Europe, including the grandfather of Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. To this day, Deputy Premier Chrystia Freeland refuses to admit what everybody knows, that Chomiak collaborated big time with the Nazi occupation of Poland. And she claims it's Russian disinformation. Can you believe that?
Successive Canadian governments helped these far-right white supremacists from ethnic organizations such as the UCC, which is the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, and funded them generously right up to today. The purpose was twofold: to create a constituency in Canada for the NATO-generated Cold War against Russia. That's a perfect example. And to undermine the government of the USSR. In 2014, the US and Canada spent billions of dollars staging a coup in Kiev, overturning a democratically elected government. Canada's foreign minister, John Baird, showed up in the Maidan Square, flanked by the leader of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, in support of the neo-Nazis, who were the foot soldiers of the West. The Stephen Harper government allowed the neo-Nazis to use the Canadian embassy as a refuge during the Maidan protest. And the Trudeau government, with Freeland as global affairs minister, poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the new de facto NATO army of Ukraine, including the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion and many other extremist organizations. The junta running Ukraine was riddled with neo-Nazis, especially in its security services. These neo-Nazis were inspired by Stepan Bandera, the same Bandera who inspired Hunka and his neo-fascist collaborators to ally themselves with the Nazis and fight Russia. Today, Ukraine celebrates Bandera with a national holiday on January 1st. Statues are put up to Bandera everywhere.
Speaking to an individual, now you caught our eye because you were carrying a Russian flag. Can you tell us why you came out to the rally today?
I came to the rally to support the right of Russians and ethnic Russians and Soviet-born citizens like myself because they're being attacked even by parties on the left. And I see this as a big problem in the left and the problem with Canada in general. And I came here to make a stand for it because I think somebody has to. People are scared to. And there's a lot of anti-Russian propaganda, a lot of Russophobic propaganda on the left that I'm trying to stand up to, and I think we're in a time now beyond ideology where people's actions are more important on the global stage and here in Canada, and that's what I'm here to support, not this ideology or that, or say that who's communist or whatever. It's about actually what is going on in the world, and I think people are using all kinds of distractions to get their narrative across. And I'm against that. I'm for peace, but I'm not for peace as some kind of nebulous concept. I think there's a path to peace, and we need to understand what that path is.
Hey, thanks for being here, Aidan, and thank you to the Canada Files. You guys put out some great content, and I'd encourage everyone who's hearing from the Canada Files for the first time to go to their website, make a donation, and above all, to be informed about the valuable journalism that they're doing.
Thanks for the kind words, Aidan.